Call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work in Mi'kmaq as a steward of the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. Now, I don't have any changes to the agenda. Does anybody else? Okay, so somebody want to, well, approve the agenda?
I'll move.
Seconder? Seconded by Clarissa. Discussion. All those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. Public input, there's no public here, so I'm assuming there's no input. Minutes of the previous meeting. Errors or omissions? Oh, there aren't any. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Proclamations, designations, we don't have any that I'm aware of. There aren't any committee reports that I'm aware of. There aren't any public presentations that I'm aware of. There aren't any bylaw and policy matters that I'm aware of. Matters arising, 10.1, request for decision prepared with adjustment to the 2026-2027 operating capital budget.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council. So not as quite as many documents for you this morning, just the one to review. So we have a request for direction ahead of you here. So the recommended action for you is to provide direction on some of the options that are presented here, and that staff will then take those options as they're approved today, build them into the full budget documents and bring them back ideally on Thursday for perhaps final approval or more debate either way.
That's the hope.
So the purpose here is to provide some options that were requested by Council on April 16th. Those options that were requested are to provide an option to limit the increase on current property tax rates to 1 cent per $100 of taxable assessed value. And the second is to provide an option for holding property tax rates the same as they are in the 25-26 fiscal year. So a little bit of background to cover what we're going to go through here. Municipalities in Nova Scotia, as you know, are prohibited from budgeting for an operating deficit in any given year.
Yep.
On April 9th, a preliminary draft budget was presented to Council. That draft budget would have required a 3.4 cent increase to both of the key property rates in order to achieve a budget without a deficit. During discussions on the 9th, Council passed a number of motions to reduce tax-supported expenditures, a whole bunch of different things, added up to $202,700. With those changes, the increase to the rates that would be required to balance the budget came from 3.4 cents down to 2.62 cents. Then on April 16th, Council reviewed the amended budget based on those changes and directed staff to make an additional reduction of $100,000. That was the capital to be funded from operating revenue. And that change further reduces the necessary rate increase to 2.23 cents per hundred.
2.3?
2.23, yes. So to achieve the reduction, to bring it to a 1 cent increase, would require an additional budget reduction of $316,560. This can be achieved obviously through either reductions in tax-supported expenditures or through increases in tax-supported revenues. To achieve the zero rate increase would require savings of a total of $574,606. On April 16th, there was also some discussion around the use of the wind energy revenues and how they're allocated to different reserves and how those reserves are used. And of course, transfers to and from reserves are considered expenditures or revenues of the operating fund, so there can be an impact to taxes based on how we transfer funds to and from reserves to fund things. So some more information in the analysis section. So the wind energy revenue right now is comprised of two different sources. There's the wind farm developers tax. This is an amount paid by, right now it's just the South Canoe Wind Farm. It's in the current budget year, it'll be, or in the coming budget year, it'll be $725,230. This amount is, I believe, set by the province and increases by exactly 1% each year. And of course, that would be dependent on the continued operation of commercial wind generation properties within the municipality. The second source of funds into the net wind revenue is the proceeds of generating power at our own wind turbine. We have a 2 megawatt wind turbine out at Kaiser Meadow. The budget for this year is a net $238,569. So that's the total revenue received for the wind power we generate, less any expenses to operate, maintain, insure, pay off the debt that we took out to build it, all that stuff. This revenue stream, as debt payments get a little bit lower each year, we expect the net contributions to go up by a small amount each year, maybe $10,000 for the next 3 years until we've paid off the debt. And then from there, we have the remainder of the 20-year power purchasing agreement with Nova Scotia Power, where we would expect that net revenue to likely roughly double for another 3 or 4 years. And then at that time,
Contract's gone.
yeah, we would not expect that, we can't bank on anything beyond that point. So the current policy for what we do with that wind energy revenue is to put 1/3 of those net funds into 3 different sources. One goes towards economic development activities, one goes to community development activities, and the other third goes to the general reserves. The current way we deal with that is by having reserves for each of those things. We have the community development reserve, which is used to fund community capital grants each year. And we have the Economic Development Reserve, which is used to fund various economic development activities through operating and capital. Historically has not been a lot used there, but we've been using it a little more in recent years. So the budget for this year shows $321,266 going to each of those 3 sources. As I mentioned, the Community Development Reserve is used for capital grant program. Council has sort of set a guideline of $275,000 per year to come from that. In the current year, there's actually 173 and change budgeted based on the requests that have been made. And with the 320,000 and change being contributed every year, there is a structural surplus built into that reserve. It grows every year because we spend less out of it than we put into it. The balance at March 31st, 2026 is estimated at just over $1.8 million in that reserve. The Economic Development Reserve, also historically been underutilized. We've spent much less out of it than we've contributed into it. We've started to close that gap a little bit over the last few years with some use for operating activities, some of the non-in-house stuff that we do, sponsorships and business support groups, stuff, a whole bunch of different stuff. There's $117,850 this year budgeted to come from that reserve for operating activities, and another $210 this year coming out for capital activities. That's primarily the work on the engagement and planning for the potential of a new rec center. The estimated balance for that reserve at the end of the recent fiscal year is just shy of $3.4 million. The general operating reserve obviously is general. It's used for a wide variety of operating and capital stuff. In addition to receiving funds from the wind energy revenue, it receives funds from any annual surplus that we have as a municipality. The estimated balance at the end of the most recent fiscal year is $16.5 million, just a little higher than that. And that's not accounting for any potential surplus that we may have had because we haven't closed the books yet on that year. Some more information on grants to community organizations. So the municipality of Chester has been and continues to be one of the more generous municipalities when it comes to providing grants to organizations within the community. In addition to the $173,000 mentioned above for capital grants this year, the 26-27 budget also currently includes $16,000 of other reserve funded grants. That's the fire protection training grant, as well as the economic development sponsorships. In addition to those, there is $443,690 of tax-supported grants currently in the draft budget. We also discussed last week the solid waste financial contributions. So the Kaiser Meadow landfill facility certainly provides financial benefit to the municipality through a contribution of 10% of gross landfill revenues to the general operating fund that's in operating, so it offsets the impact of taxes in every given year, sometimes referred to as the dividend. So the 2025-26 and the current draft of the 26-27 budgets have that 10% of gross revenues budgeted to support tax-funded activities. The current year budget draft with that 10% has an amount of $577,242. Obviously, as we know, in recent years, there have been a lot of activities that have gone towards increasing the financial benefit of this landfill. So, for example, we've negotiated contracts to get more certainty in pricing. We have been negotiating additional volumes being received from different clients. We are right-sizing the tipping fees, bringing them up more closely to market rates, as well as finding ways to operate the landfill in a more efficient way to make the landfill more densely packed and therefore have a higher long-term benefit. For example, the industrial shredder is one way that we've done that. So as a result of that work, We are fairly confident that the overall financial benefit of continuing to operate this facility will continue into the foreseeable future. And there is additional long-term forecasting and planning work required and ongoing to determine the full extent of that benefit. We do need some data on, how have some of the changes impacted operations, as in, how dense is the shredder letting us be when it used to be a certain amount, right? So the options for consideration, first of all, and I discussed this briefly last week, when coming up with recommendations for meeting the targets, there's really been a focus on finding something that will be sustainable in an ongoing basis and not simply a temporary plug from reserves that would kind of kick the problem down the road and in fact amplify as time goes by. I've seen many municipalities take that approach, and it just makes a bigger problem in the long run if you don't deal with it on a permanent basis up front. So to achieve the target of holding tax rate increases to only 1 cent, our recommendation today is to permanently change the funding source for all grants to organizations. So to remove these expenditures from the general rate supported budget. So to do this in a sustainable manner, we are recommending a change to the allocation of the wind energy revenue, which we talked about earlier. So the recommended approach would be to go from what is currently used of the 1/3 into each of those 3 sources to kind of prioritize how those funds are used. Every year, the first portion of those funds will go towards funding grants to organizations. After that is done, the remaining wind energy revenue would be contributed 50-50 to the general operating reserve and the economic development reserve. So this would be essentially the community development reserve would no longer be required because its only purpose is to fund grants. And if we're funding grants from the revenue straight up, there is no longer a purpose for that reserve. We could then transfer that $1.8 million in change into the general operating reserve to help with the ongoing, fairly substantial capital plan that we have. So some of the benefits of doing this would be, first of all, just making that one change would actually reduce the required increase to the tax rate for the current year all the way down to 0.51 cents. So achieving significantly more than the target that we were set. Sorry, I know that's not what you asked for, but I'm hoping you'll accept it. As I mentioned, it would permanently remove the need for the community development reserve, which will allow to transfer those funds into the general operating reserve. And it would provide a sustainable source of funding for grants to organizations into the future. Some of the potential downsides here would be it would reduce the expected annual contribution into the community development, economic development reserve. Into the economic development reserve and the general operating reserve. So based on current budget numbers, that would take the contribution for this coming year from $321,266 down to $173,885. It would also put grant funding at risk of potential future changes to that wind energy. When our landfill turbine goes offline, or if the wind farms that are paying this wind developers tax were to cease operations and go away, there would be a need to revisit the funding source.
Have to increase taxes again if we wanted.
Yeah, revisit grant funding approval. It would be something that would need to be addressed at that time. But for at least the next decade or so, we would expect that this would sufficiently cover everything. An alternative to that recommendation would be you could leave the reserves structured as they are now and still fund and just move all those grant funds to the community development reserve where we are currently funding some of those grants. Based on current budgeted numbers, that would take, comes out to just shy of 65% of the current year allocation of wind energy reserves. So you would need to switch to likely a 2/3 of that revenue going to community development and the other 1/3, however you felt was appropriate, whether to economic development or split somehow. So that would mean we'd have fewer changes to policies. We wouldn't be changing the policy around community development reserve. We would still need some change in the allocation of wind energy revenue, so there'd still be some, just fewer. And the risks there would be that the general operating reserve would be depleted in that it's not receiving as much contributions. And as the budgets are currently built, we have, squeezed out every last penny of planning from that reserve. And we would need to come up with some alternative funding sources for some of the long-term capital plans in particular. So that's the option that we've presented for the 1 cent reduction, or a 1 cent increase from current rates. It would actually be just over 0.5 cent if we did that. To hold rates flat, so assuming we implement that above recommendation, and to achieve the additional 0.51 cents would take another 130,916. And our recommendation, if we were looking to achieve that, would be to increase the contribution from solid waste operations to the general fund. So that would be done, the recommendation to do that if we wanted would be to increase the quote-unquote dividend from 10% to 12.3% in 26-27, and that would achieve slightly more than the desired target. We'd get 132,766 there. So the amount available there to allocate from solid waste is, we consider that a conservative estimate, but as I mentioned, we do need to do more in-depth financial analysis and forecasting to identify the actual full extent. We're fairly confident it is more than what we're recommending here, but we don't know how much more until we've gone and been able to do that work, gather that data. So the benefits here, of course, would be to remove or reduce the pressure on the general tax rates. And some of the risks would be that it reduces the amount of annual operating surplus contributed to the solid waste operating reserve. That reserve is quite healthy right now, so that's not an immediate risk, but if there were a long-term continuing to draw more from the solid waste, we could risk eroding that and having to find other ways to, fund things. Another option that to achieve a similar goal, but not necessarily the recommended method, would be to offset an increase in the general rate with a reduction in the solid waste collection and disposal rate. So because that rate is applied to all taxable properties, that would in effect offset the change. It would mitigate the impact of a rate increase. So if we were to increase the general rate by 0.51 and reduce the solid waste rate by 0.51, the net impact to people's taxes would be nil. That's another way that the similar
Would we
goal
still
could
be taking
achieved.
money out of the solid waste reserves?
That would keep the allocation of the dividend to 10%, right?
But it would decrease
It would
the
shift,
revenue going
it would
into-
essentially, it would end up the exact same impact.
Yeah.
It shows up on the tax bill rather than in
Yeah.
our own accounting records,
Yeah.
right? Exact same impact across the end of the day, like the same solid waste reserve impact, the same operating impact, just a different method to get there.
Andre?
Well, I don't see any value in doing that, honestly. It just complicates things, and it's just, that 10% number that is fictitious. There's no magic to that. And, an operation that takes many, many, many millions of dollars to run, and at the outcome of that, we make 10% profit. It's, if we were in private business, we would never do it. It just wouldn't be enough return on your investment. So, trying to assume that we're gonna run our business out there more like a business, and we're gonna try to defray some of these costs from the taxpayer, I think is a very reasonable approach. We're talking about $130,000. It's not. If we didn't have the option of turning the knob and taxing our people more, we'd be looking at the other two sources of revenue, wind and the landfill. The wind, we don't have a knob to turn there. The tax rate on the other turbines is what it is. It's prescribed by the provincial government, and the other one happens when the wind blows. We get money. We have no control over that. Maybe we're full of hot air. I guess we could go out there and blow on it, but. So that leaves the landfill, and how more efficiently and how more aggressively we can pursue the business and improve our operations there. And I think that we've been making strides in the last few years. And I think we should be continuing to do that. And I hope that into the future, we'll talk more about the landfill. I think too often we forget about it. Once in a while, staff will come in and say they need a new truck or excavator, but we don't really do much other than that. We don't talk about the strategy much. We don't talk about how to build the business and make it more competitive and all those things. No doubt staff are working on it, but in my experience, leadership comes from the top. I'd like to hear more about the landfill in the future, because as big projects come along, we're gonna wanna build up our reserves, and I think the landfill could be a good vehicle to help us do that. for now, at a minimum, we should try to hold our tax rate by taking just this small pittance from what the landfill is producing. I think in the last budget document that was from last week, we were planning to put 1.5 million from the landfill into a reserve, I think. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, it's roughly that.
Yeah. So if that ends up being 1.3 million or something like that with this proposal, I think that's quite reasonable. And then I think we should engage in a more discussion about how we're gonna try to crank it up. I think private sector landfills operate in the 20 to 30% profit margin range. We're at 12% with this proposal. So,
That's how much we would be allocating to general rate. The net gain is the contribution to reserve plus that amount. So it'd be the 1.5-ish plus the 500, 600. But yeah.
Okay,
in my world, the dividend is the profit, but,
are you done?
Yeah, that's the information. So really looking for some feedback from council. We'll take whatever feedback we're given today, build that into the official budget documents to bring back for potentially approval on Thursday or further discussion if that is the case.
Yeah, we need to discuss the church park too, because that all impacts the overall budget and where we go from there. So they're looking for an additional 200,000?
Well, no, that was,
500.
that was for the roof.
500, well, that's a lot of money. Tom, who's on first?
Counselor Isel.
Abdallah?
Thank you. Well, great work, Kim, by the way. Thank you. I like the recommendation of the 0.5%, 0.5 cent increase in the rate. I can live with that. I like the way you laid it out. That would be my recommendation, if you're looking for feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to keep us in sound financial shape. Well, I know, but we're spending a lot of money. Tom?
Thank you, Warden Weber. Very good report. I really like where we're starting to think, and I agree with Councillor Vino. There's potential money to be made in the landfill, and business communities have been healthy because of their development of landfills in the world and how they make things happen. And it's not against environmental issues. It can be monitored, and it will be monitored, and is, and I think that's the important thing to remember. It's not a free-for-all. Second of all, I'm conscientious of the Church Memorial Park issue. I mean, that's huge. We know that this week we're starting the dialogue with the communities about what their thoughts are on a new facility, but what if they don't go for a new facility? We're not going to close that one, I guarantee you we have. We got to think about that. So we've got, and I don't want to waste money. I don't want them to be putting 14 million into the building and then know they're building a new one and they're going to keep the old one. That can't happen. That's just not the way we are in this municipality. We don't have that population, and maybe in time to come we would, but not right now. And it's my books. I'm kind of closed door on that one. As for the cost that they've asked us for right now, that was, I believe, around 500,000 or a bit more. So there's 2 cents, I think, or more right there of extra stuff we have to look at
That we haven't even added
that we
into the
haven't
budget.
even talked about yet. And I don't believe that will be the last. And even though they have a challenge sometimes to do things, they've been upfront. They're an issue. There's issues there. They've been very clear. That facility, and I'm only speaking on that one right now, has major challenges with the way it was built over the years and has had some issues of not addressing in the past the way they need to now. And we're going to hold them to that because they need to. They need to bring in the projectives and things. And I would not support something that's actually going to hold that if a new facility is going to be built more than 5 years or so, because I think that's the projected time we would look at. So I'm in a debate right now between 1 cent, half a cent, and no cents, and I'm stuck on it. I know I believe clarity, we haven't touched the budget in 4 years except dropping it once.
That's correct.
Yeah, so the municipality has been very fortunate. I see, as I repeated last week, many places have to increase because they're having challenges and all that. So This is not something we can take lightly, as I know we do take it serious, but at the same time, we have a reality. There's a $500,000 ticket holding over our head that has to be addressed somehow, or that facility, again, is not going to be possibly able to operate beyond a certain period of time if something happens more. So that's a challenge. Thank you.
Andre?
The drop that we made a few years ago has come up a few times in conversation, and for those that maybe are online or new counselors, though you're not really new anymore. Just to give some context to that, during the pandemic, assessments rose at a phenomenal rate. And the reason for the reduction at the time was not because we wanted to somehow cut rates willy-nilly, but our revenue increased radically, much more than our usual natural assessment growth. And a lot of municipalities might have just said nothing and took the money and pocketed it, but we felt it was disingenuous to do that because it grew, our revenue grew faster than our budget, even though our expenses rose. And that was the reason why we did a rollback. And even with the rollback, we still brought in significantly more revenue than we had in previously. So that was the reason for the reduction, because of our assessment grew so quickly and so fast. I thought it was a good move. I still do. I'm really happy with the outcome of that. I think we have an opportunity with this landfill that most municipalities would never have. They wish they had. But there's a reason why the private sector seeks them out and wants them. It's because they're real profit engines. There's a high barrier for entry into that market. And once you're there, you have a lot of potential. And I think we have potential there. I really like Tim's suggestion of changing our policy regarding grants, that instead of having sort of revenue from wind generated sources that is split into 3 compartments, to simply just take our grant budget off of the revenue and then take the remainder and put it into against our reserves, and operating. That makes sense to me. And that's, putting and just holding these buckets full of money and not using that revenue, that doesn't make much sense. We're at a point here where we have 2 issues. One is the $130,000 between a half a cent and zero. People are struggling. The cost of fuel is just phenomenally high right now, and the message that we're sending out to our residents that we want another half a cent out of them, I think it's a bad message. For the sake of $130,000 that we know that we're making from that landfill, that's crazy, I think. The broader issue is what we do with the arena that was brought up, and I don't know the answer to that. I'd be inclined to not proceed with the capital project and just continue with monitoring for now at a lower rate, just because we don't know what we're going to do with this new arena. If the new arena proceeds, then I don't know how much money we want to spend on capital upgrades to that building. If we decide from feedback from the community and in our own, the wisdom around this table, that we want to abandon the idea of the arena, we just want to invest in fixing up the old one, then by all means, I think that's it's a good and wise course. But I got a hard time with the $500,000, and I also worry that the $500,000 may end up, once we commit to it, may end up growing to some other number, and once we've committed, then we'll be on the hook. So 500 could be 650 or whatever by the time the project's completed. All we have is an engineering estimate, and we know what engineers are like. So, I guess those are my comments for now.
Okay, who was next, Tina or Tom?
Tom.
Tom?
Warden Weber, so when you talk about property assessment values, I hear we often get accused of doing that. That's not our responsibility, you have nothing to do with it. But clarification to the CAO, usually when we do get increases in our taxes, often the province gets a lot of that back, or majority of that back,
Yeah.
because increases from them
And
every
it-
year
our-
just offset that.
It
So-
increases our uniform assessment, which
That's right.
increases our provision.
So that means we really don't get all that money, or only a small proportion, and sometimes we don't get any of it. So I think
get
that needs
half
to
of
be clarified to the public, that the increases in property assessment are done by the province. The money that we gain from that is taken back by the province often for the increases
Half of
and,
it is, yeah.
and cost to other that we work with them on. So that's hugely important. So there again, that's a play of the money thing and a balance. As for, and I'm on this Church Memorial Park, if that does stay just being monitored, then we have other issues there, because that street cannot handle, that road cannot handle that kind of traffic safely anymore. I'm getting complaints all the time about traffic on that road and other things that lead into that. So this is much more than just we fix a rink and we keep it going if the other one projectively doesn't happen. But we have to look at where we're gonna spend some money, and that's gonna be big money over the years, because that facility needs a lot when you look at it overall. I think we had some numbers and they were scary. Thank you.
Tina?
Thank you. So I do want to speak about where I am right at the moment in terms of the wind revenue discussions, landfill and the Church Memorial Park. But before I do that, I just referenced last year's budget, and when I put it out to the community, I always check when I'm putting out to the community with Tim, of course. So just for information, for last year's budget, the amount for mandatory or non-discretionary expenditures, which of course we have to automatically give to the province, it was 60.2% of our general tax rate.
Yeah.
And that comes from, not from me, but from the boss, from Tim. No, I'm kidding, right? So 60%. So, and it changes, it fluctuates. So, but now in terms of the grant discussion, so it was last meeting or the meeting before, I took the stand or the position that I would not be in support of the budget in its entirety if we were looking at making some drastic changes and taking out of that fund. I'm wavering, I'll tell you. So you know what, it's not a bad thing to admit that you might have spoken out of turn, you've thought things through. So I'm wavering, right? Maybe that's not a good way to say it. But if I'm clear on it, the first thing we would do, I mean, I'm just going back to the words here, the first thing would be to fund, to consider the grant applications each year that come in within that capital, you know, this year was 175 or something. And then from there, we would take that pot of money that instead of
leftover
tucking it,
money.
the leftover money, and put it into operating. Okay. I'm okay with that. I'm only one person, I know, but Abdallah spoke out first in terms of where he was and so on, and we all are. So I'm okay with that. Only if, I mean, again, for me, okay, so I'm okay with that if we're looking at also the landfill, and I know it's not this year, but the landfill through a more of a business lens, and I won't, you know, I don't think I could repeat what Andre said, but similar to what Andre said around being a bit more forward-thinking, not, you know, aggressive in a good way in terms of really looking at that as generating some additional revenues that we never would have, that I haven't thought about for a while, I guess. That would also go along with the thoughts that I have on the grants. And as well as Church Memorial Park, I'm also of the thinking, I don't know that I'm okay with putting, again, it's a discussion, the $500,000, saying yes to that $500,000, $500,000 request, minimum $500,000 request, this 1 year only, because who knows, going forward. If we are, again, looking at the multi-purpose facility, and I know I've heard the term here this morning with the existing Church Memorial Park facility as an arena. And so for me, the new facility is more than what this particular facility, and I know that we know that. So there's all those other components that we talked about that non-skaters, non-curlers, non-hockey players are excited about. So that's why I'm really, again, excited about the discussions going forward with the multipurpose facility, what that may mean. So, again, okay, to wrap up here, okay, so, and I'm leading then to the 0%, 0%. So, the grant stuff, I've mentioned about my comfort level with the landfill, I'm ready to get on board, but let's get going. And taking a serious look at not saying yes to the Church Memorial Park of $500,000 when we know we're getting closer than we ever were in the whole wide world to maybe what might be a multipurpose facility. 0% increase.
It'll be 10 years before it's built.
Pardon?
It would be 10 years before we have it built, though. Well, I'm just, the other one could close down in between. Anyway, whatever. Sharon?
Thank you. I'm happy with most of the recommendations. As far as the wind revenue, the recommendations I'm happy with. And as far as the landfill, I think your recommendation to increase the allocation from 10% to 12.3%, I would support that. But as far as the rink, I sit on the board. I know how, a volunteer group are trying to support that facility. It's tough. They're doing the best they can, and I think they've been doing a great job. I look at it two ways. We have to support, at the very least, the monitoring, but realistically, if it was 6 years of monitoring and no new facility, there's the $500,000. So if you spend it now, the roof is fixed, no more monitoring. Other option might be to do the curling rink 1 year and the hockey rink the following year. It may be a little bit more money because you're breaking down, the estimate, but I think it needs to be done. I can't say enough. It has to be safe for the public to be in there. At the very least, we're going to have to monitor, and if it turns out to be 10 years, then that's $750,000. And if the roof is fixed, maybe the rink could be repurposed for something else if we have a new facility. I mean, we're not really there yet for a new facility. We're in the process. What happens if it doesn't go? I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I guess we're all optimistic that we're going to have a new facility.
Yeah, so if we don't give them the grant to fix the roof or do something, then they'll probably come in and ask for more money for the monitoring to continue.
Yeah, the monitoring wasn't anticipated, it's not included in their grant, their capital, or their operating grant request. So
No.
we anticipate there'd be a request.
And I'll just comment, it was generous, the $200,000, but that doesn't include any cost of living increases which they had asked for, and they have staff as well that like to have a cost of living. And I think it's a little different than some of the other grants that we provide. And really, I feel most facilities are run by a municipality. This one is very different. And to me, I think that's the least we could have done, but it didn't happen. And I'll just say I'm in favor of supporting the roof project in 100%.
So I think Tina's next.
So I just,
The green lights were on, but they're gone off now, so.
thank you. So my question, it's a question actually. Remind me again the number of users for because when Bill Church was here in the group, minor hockey and the hockey users, he mentioned the numbers. And 173, was it? Something like that. Yeah, I thought it was 173. And so, it's a lot of money, I get it. And also the curling piece, I don't know, again, I must have forgotten, I don't know what the user numbers that came back to us on that particular piece of the facility. Again, everyone's important, but when I think of the numbers of users of the facility, makes it a little clearer, I think. Thanks.
just have one last comment on it. I know that approximately, there could be 1,900 to 2,000 people that attend that arena in the run of a week. They're not all players. They're families that come and watch. They go to Tim Hortons. They get gas, et cetera. So there's that sort of spin-off. And, if you drive there in the winter, the parking lot is full of cars. So people are somewhere. And I just think if we didn't have the rink, it would be a great loss, to our area. And I wouldn't want to see it close down until we potentially get a new one. That's really not anything that I would be in favor of. I think once they're gone, they're gone. It's hard to get them back. And, they have built up the membership for curling. Certainly, there are more young people playing hockey right now, so I think they have improved over the last few years, definitely. And I mean, if you wanted a report, I'm sure that they could provide that information more than what they presented. Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Warden Weber. Sitting here listening to all this discussion, we've got a lot of things after this debate and discussion of budget goes on. We've got the rink, we've got the facility that could be built, we've got the landfill, we've got what the whole municipality in a big picture looks like. I believe that, if, no matter what we do, if we don't support something, we're gonna have to look at it from other methods. If we go back to the table, which is reserved, that's all we have, and we definitely are healthy in reserves, but we have, I believe it was about 200 capital projects on the go over the next 5 years, which is,
Couple hundred million.
yeah, quite amazing when you think of our municipality for growth. So I'd love to give the people a zero break, no tax increase this year, but realistically, if it's not this year, we've got to do it very soon because nothing is getting any cheaper. We all know that. So it's very important to look at these things carefully.
Councilor Reno?
Okay, thank you. And I think you know where I stand in terms of tax increases and where I think that the revenue for future projects should come from. I won't repeat that. Regarding the rink, I could be swayed either way in terms of making a capital investment or not. And the purpose for reserves is for one-time capital expenditures. So obviously, if we were going to invest in an upgrade to the rink or whatever, that would come from some sort of reserve. I'm sure staff will tell us which one is appropriate, but that's how that would happen. So it won't really affect the tax rate directly, but all money we spend is taxpayer money, so we have to think about it carefully. In terms of whether it's appropriate or not, I hear Councillor Connor's argument about the impact of the investment and across how many users. We have, our Chichester Arts Center, we have the Playhouse, we have other facilities that do other things in the community, and each one, if they were to leave us, it would be a loss. And each serves a group of people that have a certain interest. I think, we gave a lot of money to the Chester Playhouse in recent years, and they asked for more, and this year we said no. For the same reason, just trying to, everybody's under the squeeze. And it would also encourage them to look elsewhere to try to raise money and find ways to operate. Municipalities have a funny arrangement with the hard recreational services, for physical activity based recreation, where they tend to directly fund those, things like arenas, trails, all those sort of things. But when it comes to the arts sector, we're a little more wishy-washy about what we'll invest in and what we won't. And I've been happy that this municipality has been investing in art and that sort of thing, because many people recreate in other ways other than physically, and that's been great. But I think that we want to be fair. And fairness, I know, is also important to the counselor from New Ross. She brings it up often. And so if we're going to make big investments in one particular user group, we have to think about how we treat the others and how we've been treating them. So again, I don't really have a strong position on the arena. I could hear the arguments here and I could be swayed either way at this point. The only one that I am very firm on, at least from my perspective, is I don't want to see a tax increase. I just think it's the wrong time with people under such pressure to send the message out for the sake of $130,000, which we have. I just don't want to do that this year, and I want to spend the next year looking hard at how we can try to increase revenues from other sources. And I want that to be a project we work on here, rather than just sort of not thinking about it until 11 months from now when we start talking about budget again. But, you know, I'm hearing the arguments on both sides of the arena, and, you know, I could go either way at this point, and so that's where I'm at.
Clarissa, I think.
Well, thank you very much. That's all we have. That's all we have is, that is what would be identified in our district, that's our rink, that's our rec facility. Whether it only allows hockey and curlers or whatnot to participate in it, but we're talking about spending enormous millions of dollars, maybe 10 years from now before we get this actual facility, this new facility proposed, you know, key ready, open the door, let's have some fun. So I don't know where I stand over the next 5 years, 2.5 years of my term. I mean, every year, the Church Memorial Park, it's die or live. If we don't get this money, we don't operate. You know, I'm not understanding last year's monitoring fees were, a request and we gave them was, I just want to
I
know the
think
amount.
the
Just under-
original estimate was 75, and then they came back for another 40. I think that's,
So $125,000 for monitoring fees
Yeah.
next year, somewhere around that. Where will we be 3 years from now? Well, there's your 500,000. Like, I don't know where I stand, but, you know, pouring out money, but here's the levy. What do we do if we don't? Then there's no rec facility at all in our district. I'm torn as well, but I don't think the taxpayers should have to, you know, I think the revenue could come from the other source you requested. I'm good. Am I good with 0.5%? I'd like to see it zero myself. I don't know if we can get there, but this comes in on the opposite end. Then all of a sudden, there's another
0.5
500.
didn't include the $500,000 for the rink.
Yeah, yeah. It's because of capital. Okay, thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Warden Weber. I think I'm becoming clear. As long as we can debate and discuss the extra things that come in as they happen, we have the one in front of us down the road for the Church Memorial Park, which we know we have to look at, and I don't think we can shut those things down and stop that. So I could live with zero at this point, but I also will not just sit here and say we're not going to support any look at what the Church Memorial or other groups look, because those are very important. And as Councilor Vino said, Deputy Warden, the other places, the Playhouse, the Arts Center, and all across our municipality, this is what we grow on and what we have in communities. And communities are healthy because we are supposed to make good decisions and bring them the opportunity to do their thing. So I can live with zero. Thank you.
Okay, well, I can live with zero, but I am concerned that some of the flexibility that we're so used to having won't be there as much if we keep spending money and don't increase our revenue sources. Because we have so much on the books.
Tim, just to put it in real, just so in my head, I didn't calculate it, but if you had a $200,000 assessment, what would 0.5 increase your taxes for the year?
So that would be.
Just so I can get a,
2,000 times 50 cents no, wait, doing it wrong. 200,000 divided by 100 is,
I was trying to
She's
do
doing
that here.
calculate.
well, you put it in the presentation, I'm just.
oh, I have,
Oh,
yeah.
did you? Okay.
I mean,
Sorry.
so actually, yeah, the capped properties are average value 207,000, so just above what you were asking, and that represents 75% of residential properties. 1 cent to that average property is $20.75. So
So
a
it's
half
So half
cent,
a cent is $10.
$10 and change, yeah.
Thank you, that gives me a little more perspective, yeah.
1
Half a
cent is
cent
$100.
is-
$10.
No, 1 cent on an average capped property, which is 75% of properties, the average of those is $20.75 per 1 cent. So if we were looking at a half cent, it would be half of that.
For the year.
$10 and change, for the entire year,
Yeah.
yes,
On a cap.
$10.
Uncapped, yeah, which is 75%, thank you.
right.
Thanks, Tim.
Andre?
That's one way of looking at it. The other way is that we have a very unfair system where not everybody is capped. And, you know, young people who just buy new houses or they're just starting out in the world, they don't have that benefit. And that's great for the old geezers that have been hanging around for a long time and have had their house for many decades, you know, that's great. They won't go up much. And generally, they're the people with the money. The new people starting out, they're the ones that get clobbered to death. Because that's where the rate ends up going. It ends up landing on the people that are uncapped or new builds.
Uncapped would be $37.
Yeah, the uncapped average was 37.
I have houses in my district that are paying
Yeah, that's
$12,000 in taxes
That's
annually,
37 more.
14,000. You know, so a cent is a lot of money to those people. All right, so like, yeah, well, I know because when I knocked on their door, they came out and they looked like they were mauled by a bear.
What is that? What is that?
So, you know, you can't simplify it down to like, oh, it's just this on average, because it ain't, not for everybody. So that's unfair.
Okay, anybody else have anything to say? Something has to happen.
A motion or 2 or 3 would be helpful to give us direction, so that we know what to
Some
prepare
direction,
and bring back.
I'll move that we proceed with the 0 cent increase option and increase the dividend to, or whatever the revenue from the landfill to 12.3%, I think, as proposed.
So that would be a motion for
Direction.
or direction from both of the
Yeah, there's
recommendations.
a policy change required in there as well.
Well, you're gonna come back, the intention is for us to come back with revised budget documents and all the motions you would need to approve with rate increases and all, or no rate increase for Thursday, so we need a motion to give us direction to proceed with preparing the rest of the budget based on.
Well, I guess that's kind of what I'm doing.
Okay. Seconder?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Yeah. Motion's carried.
Are we gonna have further discussion on the arena at this point, or what do you want to do?
Well, I don't know, it's not in the budget, and right now, unless we take the money from somewhere else, we don't have it in there.
So I think, yeah, that could be a separate discussion, like to give us direction to, if you want us to come back with options for how we would fund that amount.
Well, I think you
then
should
we can-
at least give us
We
options.
can bring that back.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to say, no, don't bother, I could also do that.
No, I think we should at least know what the options are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we also have a more fulsome, like as part of that option discussion, have a bit of more fulsome navel gazing report from our rec staff about timelines for new facilities, projections, do their best. I know, realize everything's foggy, but try to give some sort of idea of how long, even if things went swimmingly with proposing a new arena, like how long will we have to hold this facility to make the jump to the new one? I think that it's all really critical information because I think they're all intertwined, unfortunately, and it makes it hard to make decisions about capital expenditures.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. It would, our intention is to do the budget discussion this week, I think. But we wouldn't have that prepared for this week, so it would have to be at probably the May 7th meeting is scheduled right now. It'd probably be at least for that one.
Yeah.
So would we
Okay.
want to align the timing of the funding options with that timeline analysis? Because that may feed into the decision. on the funding.
Well, you can give us the options without us making a decision, because I mean,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that if we're leaving it at a zero tax increase, you're just gonna tell us which reserve fund we're taking it out of.
That probably,
Provide
and
some
we can
options.
block out that in our minds of what the expenditures will be and where it'll come from. But I think that it's really hard to make a firm decision without having an idea about how long we have to continue
this
to make
facility running.
capital investments in this place.
Yeah. Oh, I know, I can't imagine it being less than 10 years, I just can't see it. Anyway. Councilor Bremer? Oh,
Thank you,
sorry.
Ward Member. I really believe we have to do that in-depth look. And remember, staff that are there now may not have been there years ago. This is not about saying what was wrong and what was right. We've got to get it better in the future, and we've got to structure different. I'm going to repeat this, the world is changing fast, and we got to get on the game to get there. And if we lose it, in my opinion, we will never be able to bring it back what we have right now there. So we can't lose it. We have to work on ways to make sure we maintain it and grow with the future. Thank you.
And if we don't repair the roof, we're gonna have to monitor it. There's just no way out. Anyway, that's it, people. A motion to adjourn. Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried. Oh, now.